Someone asks you how you're doing and you freeze, not because you don't want to answer, but because you genuinely don't know. There's something happening inside you, something heavy, or tight, or restless. But when you try to name it, the words evaporate, so you say fine, and watch their face shift into disappointment or suspicion. They think you're withholding. You're not. You're searching for something that isn't there. This is what it's like to live emotionally muted. Not numb, muted. You still feel. You just can't translate what you feel into words. But here's the paradox. You care so much that the feelings overwhelm your ability to process them. What looks like emotional unavailability from the outside is actually emotional overload on the inside. And later, I'll show you the one psychological mechanism that accidentally makes this condition permanent, and why most people never realise it's happening until it's too late. But first, there's a specific mistake people make when trying to fix this that guarantees they stay stuck. And you're probably making it right now. You're in a fight with someone you love and they're asking what's wrong. Your chest is tight, your jaw is clenched, but you can't find the words, so you shut down. You say, I don't know, or can we not do this right now? Or you process everything after the moment. Someone says something hurtful, and in the moment you feel nothing. But 3 days later at 2 a.m, it hits. Rage, grief, humiliation. But by then it's too late. This is called alexithymia, a reduced ability to identify and describe your emotional states. Research shows people with this have reduced connectivity between the insula, processing bodily sensations, and the prefrontal cortex where language lives. You feel the sensation, heat, tension, hollowness, but can't decode it into words. And because you can't name it, you can't regulate it. So emotions pile up, unnamed and unprocessed, until they leak out. Irritability, withdrawal, physical symptoms, sudden floods from nowhere. But here's what nobody tells you. This isn't a deficit. It's serving a function you don't recognise. And there's a hidden upside to this pattern that makes it incredibly hard to give up, even when you know it's hurting you. The roots trace back to childhood. Maybe emotions were treated as inconvenient. Crying met with, stop being dramatic, or you're too sensitive. So you learned, feelings are a problem. This is emotional invalidation, and it rewires your brain. When a child's emotions are consistently dismissed, they never develop the neural pathways to recognise and articulate emotional states. Your nervous system learns to suppress emotional information before it reaches conscious awareness. You become an adult who can't tell when you're stressed until you're having a panic attack. Who can't tell when you're sad until you're shut down? You don't bottle up emotions, you lose track of them entirely. They leak out as chronic fatigue, tension headaches, insomnia. And because you can't express feelings, people treat you like you don't have any. They stop asking. This creates a vicious feedback loop. The less you express, the less people engage, the harder it becomes to express anything. But here's where it gets interesting. There's a specific sign that shows you're actually closer to breaking through than you realise. Most people miss it because it feels like the opposite of progress. Here's the deeper layer. Cognitive-affective mismatch. You can think about emotions perfectly, but can't feel them in real time. You can explain logically why you should be upset. But when you check in with your body, nothing. This happens when emotional expression was dangerous. The only way to survive was to stay unreadable, so you developed emotional suppression. And over time, it became automatic. Chronic suppression changes brain structure. Your amygdala becomes hyperactive, leaving you constantly on edge, but you can't identify what you're anxious about. Then there's culture. Men are taught expressing feelings is unmanly. Women are conditioned to prioritise everyone else's emotional needs. You become fluent in reading others but have no idea what you feel. And here's the mechanism I mentioned, the one that makes this permanent. The more competent you become at functioning without accessing emotions, the less incentive your brain has to rebuild that connection. It's called synaptic pruning. Your brain optimizes for emotional detachment, which is why this gets harder to reverse the longer you wait. And that hidden upside, when you can't access your own emotions, you become extremely competent at everything else. The reliable one, the problem solver people, depend on this version of you, and subconsciously, you know that if you start feeling things, you might lose that identity. That's the trap. But here's what separates people who break through from people who stay stuck forever. It's something much more specific. And there's a particular type of person who either catalyzes your breakthrough or ensures you never escape. And here's the part most people miss. The mistake I mentioned, trying to feel more or open up more, actually makes this worse, not better. So here's what your brain was protecting you from. Emotional overwhelm so intense that it would have shut you down completely. As a child, you didn't have the capacity to process the full weight of what you were feeling. So your brain made a trade, suppressed the signal to preserve function. It wasn't a flaw, it was survival. And that mistake everyone makes. Forcing yourself to feel more before you've built the capacity to process it just triggers the same shutdown response. That's why just open up doesn't work. You can't brute force your way through a nervous system response. You have to rebuild the infrastructure first. And that sign I mentioned, the one that shows you're closer than you think, it's when you start feeling worse before you feel better. When you notice sensations you didn't before, tightness, restlessness, discomfort. Most people think they're failing. It actually means your nervous system is coming back online. You're supposed to feel worse first. First, rebuild interoceptive awareness. Multiple times a day, check in with your body. Notice physical sensations, tension, heat, heaviness. Don't label it yet, just name it. I feel tightness in my chest. This strengthens neural pathways between body and conscious awareness. Second, practice affect labeling. Once you notice a sensation, match it with a simple emotion. Mad, sad, scared, happy. Pick one, even if you're guessing. Simply naming an emotion reduces its intensity. You're training your brain to bridge sensation and language. Third, start with low-stakes emotions. Don't try to process deep trauma. Start with, I feel annoyed. I feel bored. You're building emotional granularity, distinguishing between emotional states instead of just fine or not fine. Fourth, externalize before you express. If speaking to another person feels impossible, write it down first. Text yourself. Type in notes and delete it. Practice the skill privately before performing publicly. Fifth, reframe. I don't know as I need time. When someone asks how you're feeling, say, I don't know yet, but I'll get back to you. This buys processing time and signals you are engaging, just not in real time. And that person I mentioned, the one who determines whether you break through. You need people who can tolerate your slow processing without making you feel broken. The wrong person pushes for immediate emotional availability and triggers your shutdown harder. The right person gives you space to process and meets you where you are. That difference determines whether you heal or calcify. Finally, separate feeling from action. You can feel rage and choose not to act on it. You can feel grief and still function. I can feel this without it controlling me. You weren't born unable to express your feelings. You were taught not to. And what was taught can be untaught, not by forcing yourself to feel more, but by giving yourself permission to feel at all. The walls you built weren't a mistake. They were protection. And now you get to decide whether you still need them. People who struggle to express feelings often feel them most intensely. They're not emotionally shallow. They're emotionally overwhelmed. And once they learn to translate that overwhelm into language, they become some of the most emotionally intelligent people you'll ever meet. So if you freeze when asked how you feel, know this: you're not broken, you're not cold, you're just someone who learned to survive by going quiet. And now you're learning to survive by letting yourself be heard. Even if the first person who hears you is yourself,